Discernment is not cynicism. Cynicism says everyone will hurt you, so trust nitrogen monoxide 1. Discernment says some people will hurt you, so learn to recognize the patterns that predict hurt before it happens. The difference is, everything building discernment requires 3 capacities that most people never develop. The capacity to observe without immediately interpreting, the capacity to wait before committing, and the capacity to walk away when observation reveals incompatibility. The first capacity, observation without interpretation, is harder than it sounds. Your brain wants to interpret everything immediately. They canceled plans, which means they do not care. They did not text back quickly, which means they are losing interest. They said something that could be interpreted multiple ways, and you immediately assume the worst interpretation. But observation without interpretation means collecting data before drawing conclusions. They canceled plans. This is a fact. Why they canceled, what it means about their interest, whether this is a pattern or an exception, these are questions that require more data to answer. Rushing to interpretation based on single incidents produces anxiety and bad decisions. Plato wrote about the allegory of the cave. People mistake shadows for reality, because shadows are all they have seen. When you interpret behavior based on your fears rather than on patterns, you are mistaking shadows for reality. You are seeing your past projected onto your present. Real observation requires you to see what is actually there, not what your history tells you must be there. The second capacity, waiting before committing, directly opposes everything modern dating culture teaches. You are told that if you do not lock someone down immediately, you will lose them. You are told that playing it slow means you are not interested. You are told that real connection should feel certain from the beginning. All of this is wrong. Real connection takes time to build. Certainty without observation is not wisdom. It is impulsiveness disguised as intuition. And the person who will leave because you need time to evaluate whether they are right for you is doing you a favor by leaving. Arthur Schopenhauer distinguished between the will and the intellect. The will wants what it wants immediately. The intellect understands that what we want is not always what we need, and that time reveals the difference. The will says commit, now, before you lose this opportunity. The intellect says observe, longer to ensure the opportunity is real. Patience is not passive. Patience is active observation. During the time you are waiting, you are watching the 4 contexts. You are seeing how they handle disappointment, how they speak about their past, how they treat others, how they respond to feedback. You are letting their patterns emerge naturally rather than forcing premature commitment based on initial attraction. The person who is actually good for you will still be good for you in 3 months. The person who is not good for you will reveal that fact in 3 months. Patience protects you from mistaking intensity for compatibility. The third capacity, walking away when observation reveals incompatibility, is the hardest. Because by the time you have observed enough to know they are not right, you have already invested. You have already built hope. You have already imagined a future. Walking away means accepting that the investment was wasted, that the hope was misplaced, that the future you imagined will not happen. But here is what walking away actually means. Means you respect yourself enough to require what you need. It means you trust that better options exist, even if you have not found them yet. It means you refuse to settle for less than partnership simply because partnership is what is available right now. Epictetus taught that we suffer not from events themselves, but from our judgments about events. Walking away is not failure. Walking away is wisdom. You observed, you evaluated. You determined that this person cannot give you what you need. Acting on that determination is not giving up, it is choosing yourself. The pain of walking away is acute but temporary. The pain of staying with someone who is wrong for you is chronic and permanent. It grows over time as resentment builds, as needs go unmet, as you realize you have built a life with someone who cannot actually partner with you in that life. if you have a history of choosing poorly, if you have ignored red flags before and paid the price, you might be tempted to let that history define your future. You might approach every new person with walls so high that nitrogen monoxide one can reach you. You might interpret every ambiguous signal as negative. You might sabotage connection before it can develop, because you are protecting yourself from being hurt again. This is understandable, but it is also a prison. The person who hurt you is still controlling your life if their actions prevent you from ever being vulnerable again. You have given them power over your future that they do not deserve. Carl Jung emphasized that integration of the shadow requires acknowledging what you have experienced without letting it define what you become. Yes, you were hurt. Yes, you ignored red flags. Yes, you invested in people who were not ready. These are facts about your past. They do not have to be facts about your future. The learning comes from examining the pattern. What did the people who hurt you have in common? What red flags did you ignore? What needs of yours went unmet? And why did you accept that? These questions help you develop discernment without developing cynicism. You are not looking for perfection. You are looking for compatibility. You are looking for someone whose patterns align with your needs, whose shadow you can live with, whose rough edges do not wound your specific vulnerabilities. Here is how to approach new relationships with wisdom. First, know what you actually need, not what you think you should need. Not what sounds good in theory, what you actually need. To feel secure, to feel valued, to feel like partnership is happening. Write this down. Be specific. I need consistent communication. I need someone who handles conflict by talking through IT rather than withdrawing. Need someone whose words match their actions. Whatever a T is, name it clearly. Second, observe the four contexts deliberately. Do not wait for them to happen naturally. Create situations where you can see how they handle disappointment, how they talk about their past, how they treat others, how they respond to feedback. This is not manipulation. This is due diligence. Third, give time before commitment. 3 to 6 months of consistent interaction before making decisions about long-term potential. This is not playing games. This is letting patterns emerge. Anyone can perform for a few weeks. Not everyone can sustain performance for months. Fourth, trust your observations over their words. If their words say they are ready but their actions show inconsistency, believe the actions. If their words say they care but their behavior shows selfishness, believe the behavior. Words are easy. Actions reveal truth. Fifth, be willing to walk away when observation reveals incompatibility. This is not cold. This is self-respect. You do not owe anyone a relationship. You do not have to stay because you have already invested. Sunk costs are sunk. Continuing to invest in something that is not working does not recover what you have already spent. IT just increases the loss. Red flags exist because patterns matter. Past behavior predicts future behavior. Character is relatively stable. The person who shows you who they are through their patterns is giving you valuable information. Your job is to receive that information honestly and act on it wisely. This is not about being harsh. This is not about refusing to give people chances. This is about observing carefully before committing deeply. This is about trusting patterns over potential. This is about choosing partnership with people who are demonstrating readiness rather than people who are promising readiness. The pain of walking away from someone who is not right is temporary. The pain of staying with someone who cannot meet your needs is permanent. Choose the temporary pain. Honor your needs enough to require them. Trust yourself enough to walk away when observation reveals that your needs will not be met. This is male psyche. We examine what others avoid. We ask questions. Well, there's fear. We trust you to handle uncomfortable truths. Because the truth is what sets you free. Not from relationship, but from relationships that were never going to work. If this resonated with you, you are not alone. Subscribe for more psychology that treats you like an adult capable of hard conversations. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And most importantly, use what you have learned. Observe, evaluate, choose wisely, because you deserve partnership with someone who is actually ready to partner with you. So you have observed. You have applied the 4-context test. You have asked the questions that reveal character. And you see red flags. Now what? This is where most people make their biggest mistakes. They either ignore what they see or they overreact to it. Both responses miss the opportunity for honest assessment. The first mistake is trying to fix the person. You see their patterns. You understand where those patterns come from. And you believe that if you just love them, if you just show them a different way, they will change. This is the hero fantasy we discussed earlier. And it fails for a simple reason. People change when they are ready to change, not when you are ready for them to change. Jung emphasized that the transformation requires the person to confront their own shadow. You cannot confront someone else's shadow for them. You cannot drag them into self-awareness they are not seeking. All you can do is decide whether you are willing to accept them as they currently are, not as you hope they will become. The second mistake is playing games to test them. Creating situations designed to see if they will fail. Withdrawing affection to see if they will chase. Testing their boundaries to see if they will hold firm. This is manipulation disguised as discernment. And it poisons whatever genuine connection might exist. If you need to manipulate someone to get information, you already have your information. The information is that you do not trust them. And relationship without trust is performance, not partnership. There is a third option that most people avoid because it requires vulnerability. You name what you see. You express what you need. You create space for them to either step up or step back. This is the mature approach that respects both people. Here is what this looks like in practice. I have noticed a pattern. When we make plans, you cancel about half the time. I need reliability to feel secure in relationship. Is this something you can provide? Or is this not the right time for you to be building something serious? Notice what this does. IT names the specific behavior. IT expresses the need without making IT a character judgment. IT offers them a chance to acknowledge the pattern and change IT, or to acknowledge that they are not in a place to provide what you need. Both responses give you information. Both responses let you make an informed decision. The person who is actually ready will hear this without becoming defensive. They will acknowledge the pattern if it exists. They will make changes if they can, or they will be honest that they are not. Ready for what you need? This honesty serves you, even if IT disappoints you. The person who is not ready will respond differently, will defend themselves. They will attack you for keeping score. They will make promises about future behavior while refusing to acknowledge past behavior. They will make you feel bad for having needs. Pay attention to this response. IT tells you everything. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacle is the way. What he meant was that difficulties reveal opportunities for growth. The difficulty of this conversation reveals whether growth is possible. The person who can engage honestly with feedback can grow with you. The person who cannot engage honestly cannot. When to walk away, some red flags, or deal breakers. Not every problem can be worked through. Not every pattern can change. And staying with someone who is fundamentally incompatible with your needs will damage you in ways that take years to repair. Here are the patterns that should end your investment immediately. Physical aggression or threat of IT. This never gets better. IT only escalates. Consistent, lying about significant matters. Trust is the foundation. Without it, you have nothing. Refusal to take responsibility for their impact on you. Partnership requires two people who care about each other's experience. If they do not care how their behavior affects you, partnership is impossible. Addiction that they are not actively addressing. You cannot love someone into sobriety. They must want it for themselves. Cruelty disguised as honesty. Some people pride themselves on brutal honesty. What they are actually doing is being brutal. Honesty can be kind. Cruelty is always just cruelty. Patterns of betrayal with others. If they cheat on their partners, if they lie to their friends, if they manipulate their family, they will do the same to you. Past behavior predicts future behavior. These are not things that improve with time. These are fundamental character issues that require professional help and personal commitment to change. Your love will not fix them. Your patience will not heal them. Your understanding will not transform them. All these things will do is keep you trapped in a situation that damages you. But here is the nuance that matters. Not every flaw is a red flag. Not every difficulty is a deal breaker. And if you approach every relationship looking for reasons to disqualify the person, you will find them. Because perfect people do not exist. Healthy caution means observing patterns over time before committing. Paranoia means assuming everyone is hiding something terrible and treating them accordingly. Healthy caution protects you. Paranoia isolates you. The difference is in how you approach the observation. Healthy caution says, I will pay attention to how you behave consistently over time, and I will make decisions based on demonstrated patterns. Paranoia says, I will assume the worst about every behavior and interpret everything through that lens. Healthy caution allows for human imperfection. People have bad days. People make mistakes. People are learning and growing. Healthy caution looks for the pattern, not the exception. IT asks, is this who they are generally? Or is this a moment of struggle? Paranoia allows for nitrogen monoxide grace. Every mistake confirms the assumption that everyone is untrustworthy. Every flaw becomes evidence of fundamental brokenness. Paranoia creates tests that nitrogen monoxide one can pass. Because paranoia is not actually looking for safety. IT is looking for confirmation of its belief that relationship is dangerous. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about resentment, the deep resentment that poisons perception. If you have been hurt badly in past relationships, you might carry resentment into new relationships. You might punish new people for what old people did. You might refuse to trust anyone because someone proved themselves untrustworthy. This is understandable, but it is also unfair. The new person is not responsible for healing wounds they did not create. They deserve to be evaluated based on their own behavior, not based on someone else's betrayal. Here is where we must acknowledge shared responsibility. If you keep choosing people who show you red flags from the beginning, if you keep ignoring your instincts, if you keep investing in people who are clearly not ready, you have to examine your own patterns. Why are you attracted to unavailable people? Why do you feel responsible for fixing broken people? Why does the chase feel more exciting than the catch? These questions require honest self-examination that most people avoid. Jung talked about the concept of the anima and animus, the unconscious feminine and masculine aspects within each person. Sometimes we are attracted to people who embody what we have rejected in ourselves. The person who has rejected their own need for independence might be drawn to emotionally distant partners. The person who has rejected their own vulnerability might be drawn to overly dependent partners. The pattern is not random. The pattern reveals something about your relationship to yourself, and until you understand that relationship, you will keep choosing the same type of person in different bodies. This is not about blame. This is about agency. You cannot control whether other people are ready, but you can control whether you choose to invest in people who are demonstrating they're not ready. You can control whether you stay after seeing red flags. You can control whether you do the work to understand your own patterns. In the final segment, we will discuss how to build the discernment that protects you without closing you off, how to learn from past mistakes without being imprisoned by them, and how to approach new relationships with wisdom rather than wounds. Not all red flags are created equal. Some things that seem like red flags are just personality differences or circumstantial challenges. Other things that seem minor are actually fundamental incompatibilities that will never resolve. Learning the difference requires understanding what you are actually looking for. The red flags that matter fall into categories. Consistency between words and actions. Treatment of others when nothing is gained. Response to conflict or disappointment. Relationship to their own past. Each category reveals something essential about who they are beneath what they present. Machiavelli wrote about the importance of due diligence in The Prince. He advised rulers to observe people carefully before trusting them with power. Watch how they behave when they think nitrogen monoxide when important is watching. Watch how they treat people who cannot help them. Watch what they do when their interests conflict with their promises. These observations reveal character more accurately than any interview or performance. The same principle applies to relationships. You are not evaluating whether someone can perform the role of good partner for an evening. You are evaluating whether they actually are a good partner when the performance stops. And the performance always stops. Eventually, this is the framework that matters. For specific contexts that reveal who someone actually is. Observe them across these 4 situations and you will have more information than months of casual dating could provide. Context 1. How do they handle disappointment when IT is not your fault? Do they blame external circumstances or do they make you responsible for things beyond your control? The person who cannot distinguish between disappointment and betrayal will punish you for every unmet expectation, regardless of whether you caused IT. Here is what to look for. Something goes wrong. Plans fall through because of circumstances. Whether traffic, illness, work emergency, things that happen in life. Watch their response. Do they adapt? Do they express disappointment but move forward? Or, do they punish you with withdrawal even though you did nothing wrong? The inability to handle normal disappointment reveals someone who will make relationship exhausting. Context 2. How do they talk about their exes? This reveals more than people realize. The person who speaks about every ex with contempt is telling you something. Either they have terrible judgment in partners, or they lack the self-awareness to see their own role in relationship failure, or they will speak about you the same way when this ends. Epictetus taught that we cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond to what happens. The person who tells story after story of being wronged, of being victimized by terrible partners, is revealing their relationship to responsibility. They're always the victim. The problem is always someone else. This means when problems arise with you, and problems always arise, you will become the villain in their narrative. What you want to hear is nuance. Yes, my ex did things that hurt me, and I did things that hurt them. I learned these things about myself from that relationship. I understand my role and why IT did not work. This demonstrates self-awareness that makes growth possible. Context 3. How do they treat people who serve them? Waiters, cashiers, customer service representatives, people in positions where mistreating them carries nitrogen monoxide social cost. This reveals their character. When the mask is off, the person who is rude to waiters is showing you who they are. The person who yells at customer service workers over minor issues is showing you how they handle frustration. The person who treats service workers as invisible is showing you their capacity for empathy. Pay attention. This is not about economic class. This is about respect for human dignity. And the person who lacks it with strangers will eventually lack it with you. Context 4. How do they respond when you express a need or boundary? Do they hear you? Do they add gas? Or do they defend themselves against feedback as though any request is an attack? The person who cannot receive feedback without becoming defensive cannot build partnership. Partnership requires negotiation. Negotiation requires being able to hear that your behavior affects someone else and caring enough to change it. Here is the specific question to ask early. Not on the first date, but early enough to matter. Tell me about a time someone you cared about told you that you hurt them. What did you do? Listen to the answer. If they cannot think of an example, that is concerning. Everyone hurts people they care about, sometimes. If they have never acknowledged that they lack self, if they can think of an example, listen to how they tell the story. Do they explain why the other person was wrong to be hurt? Do they justify their behavior? Or do they take responsibility? I hurt them. I did not realize the impact of my actions. I changed my behavior. This is what you want to hear. One instance of any. Behavior is not a pattern. Everyone has bad days. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has moments where they are not their best self. The red flag is not the singular incident. The red flag is the pattern. This is where time matters. You cannot evaluate patterns in a week. You cannot even evaluate patterns in a month. Real patterns emerge over 3 to 6 months of consistent interaction. This is why people who rush into commitment often regret it. They committed to the persona before the shadow had time to reveal itself. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote that we can do what we will, but we cannot will what we will. What he meant was that character is relatively fixed. People can control their behavior in moments, but their underlying character, their automatic responses, their patterns, these do not change easily. The person who is fundamentally selfish will have moments of generosity, but the pattern will be selfishness. The person who is fundamentally avoidant will have moments of presence, but the pattern will be distance. Your job is not to judge them for who they are. Your job is to observe who they are and decide whether that is compatible with what you need. You are not their therapist. You are not their parent. You are not responsible for fixing them. You are responsible for choosing wisely. Beyond observation, there are questions that reveal essential information if you listen carefully to how they are answered. These are not interrogation questions. These are natural conversation topics that arise when you are getting to know someone, but the answers matter. Question 1. What does commitment mean to you? Listen for specifics. The person who gives vague answers about feelings and connection but cannot articulate actual behaviors is revealing that they have not thought seriously about what partnership requires. The person who can describe specific behaviors, showing up consistently, communicating through conflict, prioritizing the relationship when it competes with other desires. This person has done the thinking. Question 2. How do you handle conflict? Not whether you enjoy conflict. Nobody enjoys conflict. But what is your pattern when disagreement happens? Do you withdraw? Do you attack? Do you stonewall? Do you seek resolution? The person who's never thought about their conflict style will likely default to whatever they learned in childhood. And if what they learned was unhealthy, that is what you will experience. Question 3. What are you working on in yourself? The person who is not working on anything, who believes they are finished products, who has nitrogen monoxide awareness of their own rough edges, cannot grow. Relationship requires growth. Challenges will arise that require both people to adapt. The person who cannot acknowledge room for improvement cannot make the adaptations that long-term partnership demands. Listen not just to what they say, but how they say it. Do they speak with self? Do they take responsibility for their patterns? Or do they blame their struggles on external factors, on other people, on circumstances? The locus of control matters. The person who believes they are responsible for their growth can grow. The person who believes their problems are caused by everyone else cannot. Machiavelli advised that a prince should be slow to trust and quick to verify. The same wisdom applies here. You do not need to be paranoid. You do not need to assume everyone is hiding something terrible. But you do need to observe before committing. You do need to let time reveal what enthusiasm conceals. The rush to commitment often comes from fear. Fear that if you do not lock this person down, you will lose them. Fear that if you take time to evaluate, they will find someone else. This fear makes you vulnerable to people who are good at performing readiness without actually being ready. The person who is actually ready for relationship will not rush you. They will not pressure you to commit before you have seen enough to make an informed decision. They will not be offended by a reasonable caution, because they understand that trust is earned over time. not demanded immediately. In the next segment, we are going to examine what to do when you spot red flags, how to address them, when to walk away, and how to distinguish between healthy caution and paranoid self-protection. Because the goal is not to build walls so high that nitrogen monoxide one can reach you. The goal is to build discernment so clear that you choose wisely. You gave them months. You showed up. You invested time, energy, emotional risk. You planned a future that felt real because you made it real in your mind. And then one day, you finally saw what was always there. They were never going to be what you needed. They told you this, not with words, with patterns, with behaviors, with the gaps between what they said and what they did. And the worst part, you knew. Somewhere deep, you knew from the beginning. You saw the signs. You felt the inconsistency. Your gut whispered warnings you chose not to hear. Because you wanted it to work. Because you saw potential. Because you believed you could be the exception to their pattern. This is not about blame. This is not about making you feel stupid for caring about someone who was not ready to care back. This is about understanding why is smart. People ignore obvious red flags. Why your brain cooperates in its own deception. And what you can do to stop repeating the pattern. Carl Jung wrote about the persona and the shadow. The persona is the mask people wear, the version of themselves they want you to see. The shadow is everything they are. Beneath the mask, everything they hide, everything they deny, everything that only emerges when the mask slips. When you meet someone, you fall for the persona. You invest in the persona, but you will live with the shadow. And the shadow always reveals itself. The question is whether you are willing to see IT when IT dose. This is male psyche. And today, we are examining why you ignore red flags, how to recognize them earlier, and what frameworks actually help you evaluate whether someone is ready for what you need. Not what they say they want, not what you hope they will become, what they are actually demonstrating through consistent behavior over time. You have been here before. You invested in someone who seemed right. The attraction was real. The connection felt genuine. The future looked possible. You ignored the small things, the cancellations that always had reasonable explanations, the hot and cold pattern that kept you uncertain, the conversations about commitment that never quite led to actual commitment, the way they were all in when IT was easy but disappeared. When it was not, you told yourself these things did not matter. You told yourself people have bad weeks. You told yourself you were being too demanding, too impatient, too quick to judge. You gave them the benefit of doubt they had not earned. You created explanations for their behavior that protected your investment, and then IT ended. Or IT dragged on until you finally ended. IT is still dragging on now while you watch this, hoping to find permission to finally acknowledge what you already know. The person you invested in is not capable of giving you what you need. Not because they are evil, but because they are not ready. Oh, they are not interested. Or they are interested in the attention you provide but not in the relationship that attention could build. Recognition arrives too late, after months wasted, after emotional energy spent, after you've already built a version of them in your mind that does not match who they actually are. And you wonder, how did I miss this? The signs were there. Everyone around me could see IT. Why could I not? Attraction creates blindness. This is not metaphor. This is neuroscience. When you are attracted to someone, when you want something to work, your brain actively suppresses information that threatens what you want. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational evaluation, gets overridden by the limbic system, the part that handles emotion and desire. You literally see less clearly when you want something badly enough. Your brain filters information to protect the fantasy you are building. Red flags get explained away. Inconsistencias het rationalized patterns get dismissed as coincidence. Your own intelligence works against you. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. You look for evidence that confirms what you want to believe. You ignore or minimize evidence that contradicts it. If you want to believe they are ready for a relationship, you will interpret ambiguous signals as positive. You will remember the good moments and forget the bad ones. You will focus on their words and ignore their actions. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this deeply. He wrote that the more passionately we desire something, the less capable we become of perceiving it accurately. Desire distorts perception. The intensity of wanting blinds you to reality. You stop evaluating what is actually in front of you and start seeing what you wish were in front of you. This is why the advice, follow your heart, is often terrible advice. Your heart is not trying to find truth. Your heart is trying to get what it wants. And what it wants might be completely incompatible with what is actually available. But there is another layer. Another reason you ignore red flags that goes deeper than attraction bias. You have a story in your mind. A story about love, about connection, about how relationship works. And in that story, you are the person who sees past their walls. You are the one they finally open up to. You are the exception to their pattern. This is the hero fantasy. The belief that your love, your patina, your understanding will be the thing that finally helps them heal, helps them commit, helps them become the partner you need them to be. You are not just choosing them. You are choosing to save them. Jordan Peterson talks about this pattern extensively. He identifies it as particularly common in people who have high agreeableness, combined with low self. You want to be needed. You want to prove your worth through your ability to help someone else. So you unconsciously seek out people who need help. People who are broken in ways that require your fixing. The red flags are not problems to avoid. They are puzzles to solve. They are challenges that prove your worth. If you can get through their walls, if you can earn their commitment, if you can be the one they finally change for, then you matter. Then you are special. Then you are enough. But here's what actually happens. You exhaust yourself trying to earn what should be freely given. You tolerate behavior you should not tolerate because walking away feels like admitting defeat. You invest more and more, hoping that the investment itself will create the return you need. It does not. The person who is not ready does not become ready because you are patient. They become comfortable with your patience. They learn that they can give you minimal effort and you will stay. Your willingness to tolerate becomes permission to continue the pattern. Sometimes it is not that you miss the red flags. Sometimes you see them and choose to ignore them. This is willful blindness. The conscious decision to override your own judgment because the truth is too painful to accept. You see that they cancel plans frequently. You notice the pattern, but you tell yourself they are busy. You see that they only reach out when they need something. You notice the imbalance, but you tell yourself that relationships are not about keeping score. You see that they talk about their ex constantly, feel the unresolved attachment. But you tell yourself you are secure enough to handle it. Each time you override your judgment, you weaken your ability to trust yourself. Each time you create an explanation that contradicts what you observe, you train yourself to ignore your instincts. You become complicit in your own deception. Sigmund Freud identified defense mechanisms that the mind uses to protect itself from painful truths. Daniel, rationalization.
INTELLECTUALIZATION. Deploy all of them. You deny what you see. You rationalize what you cannot deny.
Intellectualize what you cannot rationalize. Anything to avoid the simple truth. This person is not giving you what you need. This situation is not going where you want it to go. You are choosing to stay in something that is hurting you. The willful blindness serves a purpose. It delays. the pain of acceptance. IT preserves the hope that keeps you going. IT protects you from having to make a decision you are not ready to make, but the protection is temporary. The pain you avoid now accumulates. And when it finally arrives, it arrives with interest. Every month you spend with the wrong person is a month you do not spend finding the right person. Every ounce of energy you invest in trying to make something work that is not working is energy you do not have for building something that could work. The opportunity cost is enormous, but the cost is not just time. The cost is self-respect. Every time you accept less than you deserve, you teach yourself that you are not worth more. Every time you tolerate behavior that violates your boundaries, you weaken those boundaries. Every time you compromise your standards, you lower your standards. You become the person who accepts crumbs, the person who waits, the person who hopes, and that person attracts more of the same. Because people can sense desperation. They can sense it when you are willing to accept whatever they offer. And the people who respect themselves, the people who are ready for real partnership, they do not stay with people who do not respect themselves. In the next segment, we are going to examine the specific red flags that matter, not the obvious ones. The subtle patterns that reveal who someone actually is beneath what they present. We are going to look at the 4 context test, a framework for evaluating whether someone is ready for what you need. And we are going to discuss the difference between healthy caution and paranoid self-protection. Because the goal is not to never trust anyone. The goal is to trust wisely. To observe before committing, to let time reveal what words conceal. To build relationships on demonstrated patterns rather than promised potential.